Nils Kallin had lived in Japan for 13 years, 4 of which were deep in wartime. The physical, political, and psychological damage it had done to him were almost overwhelming. Barely escaping with his life from Japan, he began the arduous journey home, to Sweden, via his only available transit, train. His recollection of this journey is recited here by his son Frederick. Controversial it may be, it is the story of a strong, ethical man who experienced something he needed to tell.
Fred, after that harrowing journey, would you tell us a little bit about what happened once your dad arrived in the Soviet Union?
Yes, he managed to travel up to the Soviet Union from Korea, and when he got to the Soviet Union, of course, he wanted to take the Trans-Siberian Railway home towards Sweden. The Soviets didn't seem to be pleased at all having a foreign traveler in the Soviet Union, and they posted 2 guards to my father. They kept him in a railway compartment on the train with the the curtains closed so that nothing could be seen outside, and they tried to keep my father drunk on vodka. My father didn't really like vodka very much, so he might have had a sip or 2, but then he refused large amounts of vodka, so after a while that was a temptation for the guards, and they actually drank the vodka and fell asleep. And my father was happy about this because he wanted to get out and walk around a little bit, so he walked around the train and he saw trainloads and trainloads of German prisoners being taken east probably to be worked to death in Siberia. And he saw many trainloads of Russian military supplies, mostly being taken west. So of course he went back to the railway compartment and continued on his travels across Siberia. Traveling on the Trans-Siberian Railway, the first hint that something was a little bit odd was when they reached the point where the Trans-Siberian Railway branches. One branch goes north, is a northern route directly towards St. Petersburg, and the other branch goes towards Moscow. Well, his travel plans and his documentation was to go to Moscow.
I see.
But he was forbidden to go to Moscow at that point, so they took him on the northern route instead. And after a long period of travel, he eventually got to the city of Kirov. And in Kirov, he was taken off the train and taken to a big villa in Kirov, and it was owned by a Soviet commissar of the NKVD, the forerunner of the KGB. And in this villa, he saw all these treasures. There were many art and furniture treasures. It was just an unbelievable collection. And he was given a feast there. He was given the finest Russian caviar and champagne. And although he really enjoyed the meal a lot, he thought this was very odd because the Soviets did not have a reputation for being kind to foreigners. So he was really wondering, what are these people after? And after some time, he started to get worried because his train, he knew the train schedule. His train was to leave Kirov, and the departure time had gone by for several hours, and he was worried about missing his train, and they told him, don't worry about it. So eventually he was taken back to the train station, and the train was waiting for him. As soon as he got on the train left the station. So there seemed to be some higher authority that was making sure that he was looked after, and perhaps that his schedule was as they wanted.
And I believe that he was taken off the train at one point, and confronted with another Swedish prisoner. Could you tell us a little bit about that part of the story?
Many hours travel after Kirov, the train came to a sudden stop. It was a very unusual stop because there was no town or city there. There's only a very small building beside the train. My father was ordered off the train at gunpoint by the two guards. And of course he didn't want to go because he was very frightened. He thought he had seen too much and it was time for him to be shot. But the guards got my father off the train and they went up to the small building, and inside the small building there was another captive, also with two Soviet guards. And my father seemed to know right away that it was Raoul Wallenberg. They introduced each other and only spoke for a minute. They asked each other if each was okay. My father said that Raoul Wallenberg spoke with a fine Stockholm accent. And then right away the guards ordered my father back on the train, and the train continued on.
I think the key here is that your dad knew that it was Raoul Wallenberg, the reason being that Raoul had a very sophisticated, if you will, upper-class Stockholm accent, which anybody from outside the Stockholm area would have spoken slightly differently.
Yes, he actually had met Raoul Wallenberg many, many years before, as when they were school children, but Wallenberg probably didn't remember that at the time, so he did have some basis for recognizing Wallenberg, and I believe he was shown a picture of Wallenberg after he got back to Sweden in order to confirm that the person he saw was indeed Raoul Wallenberg.
Well, I think that's very interesting, and then I believe that your dad continued his trip to Helsinki, and after Helsinki, he returned to Stockholm. Now, I would imagine that he had conversations at the Swedish embassy in Helsinki, and certainly in the Foreign Office in Stockholm regarding the meeting. Could you tell us a little bit about that, and also what the reaction of the authorities were to his report?
When he reached Helsinki, he reported right away to the Swedish embassy there, and he told his story about meeting Wallenberg, and he was actually invited home to stay in the Swedish ambassador's house in Helsinki, which was perhaps a little bit odd, but perhaps they were trying to protect him from Soviet spies, knowing that he had important information. When he left the Helsinki the next morning, he was ordered to report directly to the Swedish Foreign Office in Stockholm when he got to Stockholm. So when he arrived in Stockholm, of course, he was interviewed by the Swedish Foreign Office. He told a story about meeting Raoul Wallenberg, and they listened to his story. And at the end of the interview, he was told that this was a matter of great security importance to Sweden, and that it was imperative that he keep quiet about it. Apparently this interview was never recorded, and my father said he never spoke about it again until I interviewed him in 2001.
And I can confirm that I had a conversation with Per Anger, who of course was, at the time when I spoke to him, the Swedish ambassador to Ottawa. And he said, and I think he also mentioned this in this book, that when he made his report to the Foreign Office about Raoul Wallenberg, he also was told to keep very quiet about it. And the reason being that after the war, Sweden wanted to get back into the good books of the Soviet Union. So this is a very telling story also regarding Sweden's foreign policy and commercial policy, that, you know, once the war was over, they realized that it's a new world, and they wanted to not roughen up the waters, you know, with the Soviet Union. And this matter was first taken up again when Nikita Khrushchev came to a visit in Sweden, and then Prime Minister Tage Erlander confronted Khrushchev with the question, what happened to Raoul Wallenberg? And Khrushchev blew up, he lost his temper. Tage Erlander got very upset and initially refused to continue the state visit with Khrushchev, which then would have led to very bad situation between the two countries. Tage Erlander was finally convinced by his cabinet colleagues to continue the state visit with Khrushchev and to travel with him to other parts of the country. But you can see, and we can all see, how an important event this was to Sweden. And I would say that Canada created Raoul Wallenberg the first honorary Canadian citizen because of the wonderful work and self-sacrifice he conducted in Budapest in 1945.